Okay, so our second learning outcome we're going to focus on is ethics. And also, OB also deals with ethics because employees face several situations that can lead to an ethical infraction. Because employees simply do actions and their actions affect others. Ethics exists when there is a possibility that your actions will affect others, and that's pretty much almost in any situation. And that exists when you deal with other employees in an organization. So just imagine a salesperson who faces an ethical situation where he will only land a multi-million dollar purchase in exchange for a kickback. He will probably inclined to get that feedback, but what we're more concerned about here in OB is that, okay, why does that employee feel the pressure over here? Maybe it's the compensation system that is in place that will encourage other salespeople to focus only on sales when they're doing their job, and therefore they feel under pressure to give that kickback. There are also some times where there is not always a right or wrong choice. For example, you might be the manager of a division that is downsizing and will fire several employees. Your boss, however, has informed you not to tell the employees until 2 weeks notice that is legally required. So you've known about it earlier, but you won't tell them until the 2 weeks notice. But you also know that several of your employees will be in a very bad situation financially if you don't give them an early notice. So what should you do? Okay. This is a gray area here because you don't really know what to do. Should you tell your employees and ignore your boss, or should you just follow your boss and ignore the employees? These are two decisions which are really tricky in this case. Okay. So as we said, ethics are important because you will face them throughout your careers. I've been faced with situations where I've been pressured by people in the hierarchy in my previous institutions to change people's grades. So what do I do about that without losing my job? That's a very tricky situation. Unethical behavior can damage relationships. So if I change a student's grade, I lose all of my credibility. And that can hurt me, and students will never trust me. It also damages business relationships. So once you give that kickback, you become known that you will not land a deal until you get that kickback. It reduces cooperation. People are more, I would say, suspicious of your behavior, and that's not good. And finally, one thing that we have to realize is that just because it's legal doesn't mean that it is ethical. The legality of the situation only means that it is enforced by the law. Like with the previous example where we said that, give them a 2 weeks notice and that is what is required by the law. But ethically, you might need to tell them or let them know ahead of time to make sure that they can really find replacement jobs. So remember, ethics is a higher bar than legal. Legal is just making sure that we fulfill the legal or requirements and adhere to the law. Okay. So as we said, situations will arise, and that's what we talked about. There's sometimes a gray area where there's no usually a clear-cut situation is what I'm doing right or wrong, like with the 2 weeks notice example. But let's take a look at, I think this is very important, about what are the causes of the unethical behavior. One of them is ill-conceived goals. Sometimes we have good intention and want to reward a specific type of behavior, but we end up rewarding another. So for example, if we totally focus compensation of salespeople on commission, that can cause them to bribe purchasing managers just because this is what they're solely evaluated based on. The other thing is motivated blindness. Sometimes we are, it's in our situation or best interest to, turn an eye to what's going on. So if a sales manager notices that his sales employees are doing really well and their sales are really high, but also notice that they're have a high expense account, which might be an iffy situation, they might be motivated to turn a blind eye, and because they look good because of the sales of their employees. And another thing is indirect blindness. Sometimes we turn a blind eye to or accept something if it's performed by a third party. So for example, if Nike does a lot of its subcontracting to countries in India and let's say China, but they're not really the ones who are manufacturing them, and then this manufacturing is done by kids or in inhuman conditions, then we might say, oh well, Nike is not the one who performed it, and therefore it's not really at fault. And this is what we find in consumer behavior, is that customers tend not to blame the manufacturer because they're not the one who performed the infraction. It was done by a third party, in this case, which were the contractors. The other thing is that why unethical behavior happens is because it is done usually slowly over time, like accounting infractions that can happen over time and not paid attention to, might be not viewed as really big because they are done slowly. And finally, when we look at overvaluing outcomes, and this, I think the one that comes to mind is the end justifies the means. So if the end is positive, but let's say in the process we've done unethical things, then people tend not to really view it as unethical. So for example, if we've just passed a drug, we've put it into the market without substantial testing, and nothing comes back from side effects, we tend to view what the company did as acceptable, because there weren't any harmful outcomes. Okay, so but however, the company failed to do that substantial testing before it was introduced to the market. However, contrast that with another situation in which that same drug had severe adverse effects, side effects, and people died from it. Well, we'll view what the company did as bypassing all of that extensive testing as being wrong. So we tend to look at the outcomes to judge the behavior was done, and that is also wrong because the ends don't always justify the means. So these are some causes of unethical behavior. So what can we do to deal with unethical behavior? What we'll find is that we will look at unethical behavior just as any type of decision. It's a business decision. You also have to affect that confronting ethical concerns is part of your job. And like I had to face issues with changing grades, making my content easier, lots of different things that I had to face in my career, and that's part of your job. We always have to challenge why are we doing things. One of the things that Bookyer says is that lack of seniority is an asset. Then you can really question why things are being done. I don't understand why we're doing it this way. And another thing is we want to look at what are the long-term consequences of your decision. Finally, focus on solutions and not just complaints. So for example, that person that was not allowed to give his employees a 2 weeks notice, should not just complain, well, that's gonna hurt my employees. Well, not telling his employees is one option, is one solution. The other is telling the employees and ignoring the manager's third option. Maybe a third option would be to convince the manager that this is not in the organization's interest in the long run, because this will lead the employees to complain. They might even file a lawsuit. It might even lead to lower morale amongst the existing employees who might feel that they are really uncertain about how this will affect them. So this hurts the organization in the long run as well. So focusing on solutions and how they can have a long-term negative consequence for the organization could also help you to make a better ethical decision. So let's test our knowledge review. Which of the following statements about ethics is not true? Okay, so ethical dilemmas occur when neither of two choices ethically resolve the situation. Most people working in organizations are good people with good intentions. If something is unethical, it is also illegal. Our conduct is shaped by our environment, and reward systems can cause unethical behavior. Well, if you said C, then you are correct. As we said, unethicality don't always match with illegality, right? Just because something is illegal does not make it ethical. Just what we did with, informing your employees more than 2 weeks ahead of time. Okay? That's an ethical thing to do, but it's not illegal. Okay, so that wraps up our second learning outcome.